Hello, everybody. I am live, as promised, a couple minutes after my schedule. I wanted to be here exactly at 8, but hey, tomato. I'm here now. So, let me just go on my page and try to tag a few people that said they were interested. So, 1 second. I'm just going to tag a couple people. All right. Hello, everybody. Let me get out of there because no. All right. So anyway, I only tag like one person, but anyway, whoever is not here during the live, you can catch the replay. What do you mean you watching football? That is absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. Well, thank you for stopping through, Suggs. But anyway, I guess I'll be here all by myself. All right, so what I'm doing today is I'm doing a part 2 to the message that I was talking about 2 weeks ago. So 2 weeks ago we talked about women, wives, and witnesses, God's love for the female population, part 1, and today is a continuation of that. As I said before, this was something that kind of like came upon me, I guess, like, because it's not even really a topic I was necessarily interested in, but as I was studying about like the Bible or reading from Genesis or whatever, God just started like showing me different stuff about women and showing me, like, in addition to that, how people's perceptions of women have been skewed throughout history. So, and it's not just women's perceptions of ourselves that have been skewed. It's men's perceptions of women that have been skewed in a kind of a negative direction over time. And it's gotten to the point where biblical history and Christianity in general has been sort of man-washed, so to speak. So, and by man-washed, what I mean is that there's been a disproportionate emphasis on the male characters in biblical history rather than having a balance between the male characters and the female characters that both played undoubtedly significant roles in it throughout history. So throughout biblical history, not just in certain parts here and there, but throughout the entire history of the Bible, women and men have both played very significant roles. But unfortunately, what's been happening is that we've been seeing a disproportionate amount of male emphasis rather than the balance where we add the females in or give females the same level of light or the same level of shine that they properly deserve. And as a result of that, I believe that one of the things that has happened is that women have developed a negative or less than perspective of themselves that is not supposed to be the case. Because once again, I said it last week and I'll say it again this week, God doesn't have a problem with women. And God is not a misogynist. God is not a chauvinist. God is not for the oppression of women. God is not for seeing women as less than men. God does not see women in these ways that have been stereotypically prescribed to us by other people in society or even by some people within our own circles, unfortunately. So as we know from looking at any segment of history over any time, we can see that people's views may have been skewed one way or the other about a number of different topics, but this is the one topic that we're going to talk about tonight. So if you see my post that I put up like an hour or so ago, you've probably seen that this is like the first time I've done a study that has simultaneously infuriated and inspired me. And the reason why I say I was infuriated and inspired at the same exact time is because of the fact that I've never, like what we're going to talk about tonight, I've never seen it said in this way. And I've never seen it emphasized in this way. And it's crazy that it was never emphasized this way. And you'll see exactly why it's so crazy in the moments that unfold. So I don't know how long we're going to be here, but we're going to be here. All right. So if you see the subtitle, which I hope showed up, it was basically saying we're going to talk about 6 women that inadvertently worked together to pretty much ensure the preservation and subsequent salvation of Israel. So of Israel as a whole, there were 6 women that worked together without even really realizing that they was working together, but they worked together to help preserve and ensure the salvation of Israel. And this was before any man really stepped on the scene, as far as like Israel was concerned. Obviously, we know Abraham's the father of the faith, etc., etc. We're going back to Adam and Eve and all that. But when it comes to Israel and Pharaoh and Moses and all that, there were 6 women that stepped up before Moses ever began his ministry. So before Moses began his ministry, God makes it a point in his scriptures to highlight 6 women that played a significant role. And we're going to talk about all 6 of them tonight. All right. So first and foremost, we start in at the beginning of this story, which is in Exodus chapter 1. And for tonight, we're going to stick with Exodus. So we'll talk about Exodus 1, Exodus 2, Exodus 4, Exodus 15. And there's one scripture in Micah that we'll briefly highlight. But all the rest of the scriptures are in those chapters of Exodus. So fresh out the gate, very first chapter of Exodus, the story opens up where we've already heard the story of Joseph. We already heard the story of how he brought his brethren over to Egypt. There was a famine in the land. They got saved by what he did, etc., etc. So we got to the point where Joseph and all them died. And now there was a new Pharaoh that came on the scene, and he didn't know nothing about Joseph, basically. So he didn't know anything about what Joseph did. And he's like, I don't know Joseph. All I know is that all Joseph's children is getting to be a little too many. So there's a little bit too many of y'all out here. So he's seeing that all these Israelites, they're like growing and multiplying and growing and multiplying. They just having kids upon kids everywhere. So he gets to the point where he gets scared. And he's like, all right, there's a couple too many y'all. We got this number of us and we got that number of y'all. And pretty soon y'all gonna overtake us. So basically he got scared. So he was like, okay, so what can we do about this? What can we do to make sure these people don't take over and basically kill us all one day? What he decided as a solution to this was enslave them, which is terrible. That's another story for another time. But he decided to enslave the Israelites. So they were already kind of working for them by doing whatever they was already doing. But he decided to turn their work into forced labor. So he decided to put oppressiveness on, or put oppression on them. He decided to assign people over them to basically have their sole job was to make their lives miserable, essentially. So he made them slaves. He oppressed them further and further and further to the point where he thought that he would basically end up destroy them by doing this. But it got to the point that all they did was keep multiplying. So his little plan failed. So he was like, oh, my plan didn't quite work. There's even more of them now. So what's my next option? Oh, how about I kill their kids? So that's terrible. So he decided that he wanted to murder all male children, all male infants. And this is where the first 2 women step on the scene. So what happens is, in Exodus 1, he decided that his final plan was going to be to kill the male infants. And there are 2 Hebrew midwives that Pharaoh steps to. So he comes to them. Their names are Shiphrah and Puah. Probably said both of those wrong, but hey, they're mentioned. These 2 women, he came to them and he said, all right, so here's the deal. Here's what you guys are going to do. When the baby is born, since you're the midwife, you're the one helping the baby get born. When the baby is born, if it's a man or if it's a child, a boy child, I want him dead. And if it's a female child, she can live for now. So, of course, these were their people, so they weren't trying to do that. So Shiphrah and Puah, they kind of said, no, like, I mean, we don't know. I mean, this is crazy, Pharaoh. So they decided that even though they were pretty much putting themselves and probably everybody else at further risk, they decided not to go with what Pharaoh told them to do. So they did not kill the kids. Then he comes along and he realizes that these male children, everybody keeps multiplying. So despite the fact that he told them to kill the male children, ain't no male children dying, basically. So he came to them, he was like, what happened to what I told y'all? And they said, oh, see, because what happened was, like, the kids were being born too quick. Like, we ain't like y'all. Like, our babies pop out. Like, y'all might take, like, 7 to 10 hours of labor, and we just in and out. So the baby's already born before we get there. So what you want us to do? So obviously they were lying, but they were lying to save their people. So Pharaoh came up with another plan. He said, all right, well, since y'all claimed that they was born too quick and my plan did not work, I got a new plan for y'all because I really want these kids dead, which is absolutely terrible. I probably should have said like a trigger warning before this, but it's absolutely terrible. He said, I want these kids dead anyway. So my new plan is after the kid is born, whether or not you was there when they was born or not, if you see that it's a boy, I want you to throw him in the river. And that way we'll ensure that he's dead. And then if it's a female, you can let her live for now. So at this point, their backs are against the wall. And it's like, we've done all that we can, kind of, and we don't know what to do at this point. So then another woman steps on the scene. So we got our first two women. We got Shifra and Pua. They stepped up. They did not do what Pharaoh said. They helped to preserve as many children as they could before Pharaoh gave his second command and said, throw them in the river. So then we trickle down a little bit further and we pick up in Exodus 2. So in Exodus 2, the story once again picks up with another woman. So it's Moses' mother, Jochebed. And I probably said that wrong too, but Jochebed. So Jochebed was a very brave woman, and we'll see why. So just like the first two women that we just mentioned, she decided to stand up against Pharaoh in her own way. So her child was born. She gave birth to her own child, and it was Moses. Obviously, we know this from the story. But instead of throwing her son in the river, or instead of killing her son when he was born, she decided to save her child. So she hid her child for 3 months, which was undoubtedly a very, very risky thing to do, because of the fact that if Pharaoh didn't have a problem killing infants, it's pretty obvious to assume they probably didn't have a problem killing you either. So you a full blown adult. He ain't got no problem killing your kid. He probably doesn't have a problem killing you either. So she put her entire family at risk. She already had 2 kids. She had Aaron and she had Miriam already, a son and a daughter, and she had her husband, obviously, and herself. So she put everybody's life at risk out of faith, and she decided to hide her son because she wasn't about to kill her baby, basically. So she stood up in faith. She stood up in holy defiance, and she decided not to do what Pharaoh said. But it got to the point where Moses was getting too big, and it was too hard to hide him, so she had to step out on faith yet again. And she said, I'm imagining, she said in her heart, Lord, I don't know what to do, but I'm not killing my kid. So what she did was she put Moses into a basket. After she put him in a basket, she put the basket in the river in hopes, probably, I'm assuming, she put it in the river in hopes that somebody would find him and that somebody would have mercy on him, is what I'm assuming. So she put him in the river. She still did not kill her kid. She put him in the river and let him go, basically. So then, yet another woman pops on the scene. Pharaoh's daughter. So Pharaoh's daughter goes down to the same river that Moses was just put into. So Pharaoh's daughter comes down here. And she sees the basket. She doesn't realize what's inside, but she sees a basket floating along the riverbanks. So she says, oh, y'all go get that basket real quick. So her servants go out and they go get the basket. They took the basket out, they opened it up, and she saw that it was a baby in there. And she immediately recognized that the baby was a Hebrew baby. So she knew this was not an Egyptian child, because apparently they look different from each other. So she knew that this was not an Egyptian baby. She knew that this was the Hebrew baby. But instead of saying, ooh, throw him back in the river, and this time without the basket, instead of doing that, she had compassion on the child, and she decided to save him. So I don't know if she had a conversation with her father or what, but somehow, some way, Moses ended up not having to die. So she ended up keeping him. She ended up naming him Moses, because in Egyptian, I guess that means she pulled him out of the water. So instead of Moses dying in a river, he ended up growing up as royalty in the palace with Pharaoh and his daughter. So now we up to about 4 women? We had the 2 midwives, we had Moses' mother, and we had Pharaoh's daughter, woman number 5. And this one was just a young girl. She wasn't even a woman at this point. Moses' sister, Miriam. So Moses' sister, Miriam, this is a young girl. I don't know how old she was, but she was a young girl. She was obviously older than Moses, but she was a young girl at this time. And what she was doing was she was standing by the river to see what would happen with her brother. So she was probably standing watch. I don't know if her mother told her to do it or what, but she was standing watch, following her mother's model of bravery and her mother's model of holy defiance. She's standing there and seeing what happened with her brother, basically. So then she sees Pharaoh's daughter pull him out of the river. She sees her basically show him compassion and decide not to kill him. And she immediately jumps into action. So she comes over to Pharaoh's daughter and she says, hey, since that's a baby, do you want me to go get somebody that can nurse him for you? And then Pharaoh's daughter is like, yeah, please go get somebody to go nurse this baby for me, because obviously I ain't got no kids, or maybe I don't know if she had any kids, but whatever. She said yes. So what Miriam did, Moses' sister, she went and got her mother. And then Moses was reunited right back to his mother again. So that's like beautiful in and of itself. So she put her son in the river out of faith in hopes that somehow he would be saved. God ended up using Pharaoh's daughter to save his child, and then, or save her child, and then reunited her with her child for pay, because Pharaoh's daughter ended up paying her to nurse her own son. Now, she probably didn't know that she was paying the child's mother to nurse her own kid, but hey, it ended up working out that way. So now we up to 5 different women that done worked up and done stepped onto the plate to help preserve the salvation and preserve the nation of Israel for its subsequent generations. So then we're going to take a pause because there's another woman that we have to discuss before we get back to Miriam. So right now we see Miriam as a young girl, and we see that the role that she played in saving Moses as a young girl. We're going to get back to her as an adult woman, but first we got to go to yet another woman. So this is the 6th and final woman that's going to be mentioned. We got Zipporah, which is Moses' wife. So her story is a little bit screwy here. We don't know fully why certain things happened in her story the way that it happened, but all we know is that she played a role in the salvation of Moses and then subsequently Israel as a result. So what happened was, if we heard the story of how Moses fled the scene, he grew up obviously in the palace. After he grew up, he saw the oppression of his people. He did not agree with it. If you read the story, you probably seen that he saw an Egyptian oppressing his brethren. He ended up killing that Egyptian and then hiding them in the sand. A little bit after that, he saw 2 of his Israelite brothers fighting with each other, and he tried to influence some level of solidarity between them. And he says, "Hey, we brothers, why are we fighting?" basically. And they said, "Who are you? You sit over in a palace like you high Siditi or whatever. Who are you to be judge over us?" So then Moses is like, okay. So then Pharaoh finds out. I don't know if somebody told on him or what, but Pharaoh basically found out that Moses had killed one of his soldiers. So he set out to kill Moses. So Moses skips town. So when Moses skips town, he goes to a place called Midian. When he gets to Midian, he meets a man, meets his daughters, and then he ends up marrying one of the daughters. And that's where Zipporah comes into the scene. So Zipporah is Moses' wife. So they get together, they have a kid, and God ends up calling Moses and telling him that he's about to send him right back to Egypt to go save his Israelite people, because he heard their cries, he heard their oppression. He did not agree with the slavery and oppression that they were put under. So God is against slavery. We're going to talk about that later. But anyway, he did not agree with the oppression and the slavery that his children were facing. And he saw what Pharaoh had done with all their male children that he did end up being able to successfully kill. So he's like, no, it's not going to ride like that. It's not going to roll like that. I'm going to use you to go back and save your brother like you tried to do in your own strength, but you're going to do it in my strength this time. So Moses and God have a little bit of a back and forth where Moses is kind of afraid to go because he has certain insecurities about himself. And God is like, look, all right, use your brother Aaron. He's gonna be your helper or whatever, but you're gonna go and save my people. So Moses is like, all right, let's go. So then Moses takes his daughter, takes his son, takes his wife, and they start on their quest toward Egypt. And on their quest toward Egypt, they end up stopping at somewhere, I guess, overnight or whatever as part of their journey. And while they're at this overnight location, things get a little bit real because God tries to kill Moses one of those nights that they're at that place. So we don't know why God was going to try to kill Moses. We don't know why he was going to do it. There's like lots of speculation as to why God was going to kill him. But all we do know in every single translation that I read is that Zipporah saved the day. So somehow, some way, she knew what to do as a solution to stop God from killing Moses. And what she did was she came and she circumcised Moses' son. And then as a result of that, God relented and allowed Moses to live. So we don't know why it happened. Some people speculate and they say that one possible reason why this was going to happen was because of the fact that there was a law that was already established, which said that all of the males of Israel had to be circumcised on the 8th day after their birth. So that may be the reason why God was going to kill Moses, because he didn't obey the command, obviously. So that's one speculation, and I'm assuming that's probably true, but we don't know for sure. Nobody does. But all we do know is that Zipporah saved the day. And she's the one who jumped into action. She's the one who knew what to do. And she's the one who saved the day. So Moses lived as a result of that. And that's Exodus 4th chapter and the 24th through the 26th verse. So we scroll back down and we see that after that, they go through all the plagues. They go back and forth with Pharaoh all those times. We skip all the way up to the 15th chapter of Exodus, and Miriam jumps back on the scene again. So if you remember Miriam is Moses' older sister. So she's the one who kind of helped save him, so to speak, and helped him get reunited with his mother after his mother had saved him by hiding him for 3 months. So Miriam played an integral role in Moses' upbringing, in him being saved, and him being reunited with his mother. So Miriam played a very strong role in her childhood. But then we see her again in her, I don't know if she's early adulthood or middle adulthood. I don't know how old she is. But all I know is in Exodus 15, she pops back on the scene again. And when she pops back on the scene, this is after the Egyptians have been, or after the Israelites have been saved by Egypt. They had already gone through the Red Sea and all of that. They had already got saved. Egypt's gone now. They ain't got to worry about them no more. And now they're basically free to serve God, or free to serve the God that saved them from slavery, saved them from their oppression. So Miriam, what she does is she sings this prophetic song. And she sings this prophetic song that becomes one of the oldest traditions in all Israel's history. So she sings this song. It's a prophetic song. And at the same time, she's established as the first female prophet. So she's the first female prophet that is mentioned in the scriptures. And I guess it's demonstrated through the fact that she sings this prophetic song and does a bunch of other stuff. And in addition to that, we find out later on that Miriam actually helped to lead the nation of Israel along with Moses and Aaron. So Moses was obviously the one who got called. God chose Aaron to be his helper because Moses was too insecure to do it himself at first. But he also chose Miriam to help. So there were 3 prophets over the nation of Israel. Moses was the head because he was the one who was called. But Miriam and Aaron were also prophets who were called to kind of triple team this thing, so to speak, in leading the nation of Israel. So we see that all of these women played a very strong role in the salvation and preservation of the nation of Israel. And after that we can kind of see that there's all these great things that we just mentioned. We see that Miriam obviously showed great strength from her youth, but she was not without flaws. So just like Eve, we talked about how God saw her as just as capable as Adam. He saw her as a complementary counterpart. He saw her as ruler over the earth right along with her husband Adam, but she had her downfall. So did Miriam. So Miriam had a downfall just like Moses had his downfall, just like Aaron had his downfall. Miriam had her downfall as well. So I forget which actual chapter it's in, but we learned through the book of Exodus and probably a little bit of Numbers and other books too, that Aaron actually helped, or not helped, but he kind of went along with the people's idolatry. When Moses went up on the mountain to speak with God and get the 10 Commandments and all that good stuff, Aaron kind of went along with the people. And then when Moses came back, he kind of lied, and he had a few more rebellious moments after that. Moses broke God's command when God told him to speak to the rock instead of hitting the rock when he was performing one of his miracles. And Miriam rebelled against Moses a few times about his leadership, about him marrying a woman of another race. There was a few times that she rebelled or incited rebellions against Moses. So all 3 of them had some issues with them along with their strengths. So they all had weaknesses along with their strengths. And as a result of that, Moses, Miriam, nor Aaron, not one of them ended up going into the promised land, which is unfortunate. So all of them did all that work, all of them tag team over Israel, and not a narrow one of them ended up going into the promised land. So it was unfortunate. After all that they done, and after all the wonderful works that they did, all the miracles and all that good kind of stuff, because of the fact that they each rebelled in their own kind of way, God did not see fit to allow them to go into the promised land. However, that doesn't mean they're in hell or anything like that. So Moses is not out here burning no more, or he's not out here burning. Aaron's not out here burning. Miriam's not out here burning. But because they were under a different covenant, they had different promises, all that good stuff. However, I believe that this is kind of like a foreshadowing of Judaism versus Christianity and law versus grace. So despite all the wonderful works, all the miracles, all the good stuff that Moses and his siblings did over the nation of Israel, their works that they did not enter them into the promised land. And if we know from learning about the Old Covenant or the Old Testament, we see that works played a very heavy role in how God sees you, basically. But when it comes to Christianity, or when it comes to the New Testament or the New Covenant, our works is not what establishes us in God's eyes. It's Christ's work. So Christ's work on the cross is what leads to our salvation. And as a result of us receiving salvation through Christ's work, we end up being able to perform works in Christ's name. So it's kind of like a reversal, so to speak. So in Israel, under the law, under the Old Covenant, their works kind of led them, in a sense, toward God. But in Christianity, Christ's work leads us to him. So it's kind of like an entirely different covenant, or entirely different promise. So I just felt like that was something that was kind of important, and it's kind of could be seen as a foreshadowing to what was going to happen later on. So Israel was just one part of God's plan for the salvation of mankind, but Christ was the ultimate plan for God's salvation of all mankind. So I just wanted to end with that. But so that's the end of the message. That's the end of what I got today. Hopefully you saw why I was both infuriated and inspired. If you didn't see it, I just want to reiterate it once again. The reason why I was infuriated was because of the fact that I've literally never heard anyone in my little 12, 13 years of being saved, or being receiving salvation, or being in Christ, in all my little time being here in Christ, I ain't never heard nobody talk about how women basically helped save Israel. And I never heard nobody highlight the fact that it was 6 women that literally were mentioned before Moses started his ministry. So before Moses ever really did anything, there were 6 women that did it first. There were 6 women that stepped up to the plate first. And God made it a point in his scripture to highlight these 6 women. So he didn't just sweep them under the rug, as many would have us believe, because there's a lot of people out there, whether intentionally or unintentionally, there's a lot of stereotypes that are being perpetuated. And there's a lot of negative stereotypes being perpetuated about God, about Christianity, about the Bible. And a lot of people really believe that God is a misogynist. They believe that the Bible is supportive of the oppression of women. They believe that God has a problem with women, that God sees women as substandard. And as a result of that, there are a lot of women who are walking around believing that. So there's a lot of women walking around believing that God doesn't care about them the same way that he cares about a man, that God doesn't see them the same way that he sees a man. But if we believe that the Bible is divinely inspired, and we believe that God is the one who led these men to write these scriptures, if we really believe that, then we got to take it as what it is. And if you read Exodus, now you may not have read along with me, but if you want to go back and read it yourself, you will see for yourself that Exodus chapter 1, Exodus chapter 2, Exodus chapter 4, Exodus chapter 15, and then if you go over to Micah, where it talks about how Moses and Aaron and Miriam were all called to help lead the nation of Israel, you will see that time and time and time again, God made it a point to highlight these women. Despite what has been historically done, despite the story or the narrative that has been historically pushed, this in and of itself pretty much kind of proves that God is not a misogynist. God is not against women. God is not for the oppression of women. God loves women just as much as he loves men. He has called women just as much as he has called men. He doesn't have a problem with us. He actually highlights the importance and the significance and the weight of what we have done in history, just like he does with the men. It's us who have kind of corrupted the balance a little bit, but it's time to get that balance restored. So that was one of my purposes for spreading this message tonight, to help bring a balance, not to put women above men, not to bash men in any kind of way, but just to tell it how it actually happened, rather than the way that the story has been spun to kind of fit a certain population and kind of deny the other one. That's not fair. God is about equality. God is about justice. And I believe that this is a form of justice or a form of equality by pointing out both sides that played a role, not just one. So, God bless you. That's all I got to say for tonight. Hopefully somebody got something out of it. And that's all I got to say. But next time, I'll be coming back with some more, though. That's terrible how I say that's all I got to say, but then next time I'm coming back with more. But next time I will be coming back with some more. And I do have I remember last time I told y'all about how I started writing a book as a result of everything that God has been showing me. Because even though we talked about a lot 2 weeks ago and we talked about a lot tonight, there's a whole lot more that we didn't even talk about, and we're not going to talk about. It's going to be talked about in the book. So hopefully y'all will get the book. Hopefully somebody will be inspired and not necessarily infuriated, but if you get infuriated, hopefully your inspiration overtakes your infuriation. All right, so I'll talk to y'all later. God bless.